Boys you are.
I was ready to light out of there so fast you wouldn't even see my shadow keeping up to me. Only I knew I just had to hang around there long enough to find out what happened to Jim. I just had to.
The story of Huckleberry Finn continues at the same time next week. Tomorrow at 4:55, there's the return of Crackerjack with Stu Francis and special guests, the Great Soprendo, Modern Romance, the Jets and the Hot Dogs. But in a few minutes on BBC1, there's Blue Peter, It Follows, John Craven's Newsround.
A gift from the Lord Mayor of London to some handicapped children. Hello again. The Lord Mayor of London has promised a gift of £50,000 from his appeal fund to help save a threatened adventure playground for handicapped children in Chelsea. It was the first of its kind in this country. The Lord Mayor, Sir Christopher Lever, lives only a few doors away from the playground, so he was aware of its plight, the threat of closure. The playground is in the large garden of an old rectory in the centre of London. The land is owned by the Church of England, which let it to the playgroup free 12 years ago. But as we reported on Newsround, the rectory went up for sale because the church needs money. Now that sale is all set to go ahead, and that means the playground will have to go. So the playgroup is desperately trying to find another suitable site. If it can do that, the Lord Mayor's gift will help it move and rebuild the playground. The church says it can't let it stay in the rectory, but it may be able to find a new home in London in the Archbishop of Canterbury's garden at Lambeth Palace. But the playgroup fears a move could take a long time, and in the meantime, hundreds of handicapped children might have nowhere to go. A remarkable plan to give 37,000 London school children a special test has been given the go-ahead by one of the city's biggest councils. Brent Council are to carry out the test because they're worried about the effects too much lead in the atmosphere has on people. The move comes after surveys in 12 schools in the area. Paul now reports.
This is one of the 12 schools examined in the survey. Dust was collected from the building, and when tested, it was found that the level of lead in the dust was 12 times higher than the limit set by the European Common Market. It was these findings that alerted the council and prompted them to give all the children in their area a simple blood test. From the tests, experts will be able to judge how much lead from the surroundings is getting into their blood, as one of the councillors behind the move, Mr. Ron Anderson, told me.
We want to find out exactly how much of this dust is entering the body of children. So we're going to carry out these tests to find out how much lead there is in children's blood. This will actually be a very simple, quick test. It won't hurt, and we're going to have to get the permission of parents to do it. But we feel it's vital to get this information if we're going to really know the damaging effects of lead.
Tiny particles of lead often enter the atmosphere from car exhausts. So the council have joined in the campaign to press the government to ban lead from petrol. But old paint and waste from industrial sites are other causes, so the council are to mount detailed surveys of industrial sites, and the paint in all their schools will be closely examined too.
Princess Anne is now in the country of Zimbabwe on her long fact-finding tour to meet the children of Africa. Today she was given a big welcome at a centre which looks after crippled children in Zimbabwe's capital city. It's the second country on her tour, which began last weekend in Swaziland. Later on she'll go to Malawi, Kenya, Somalia and Djibouti. Princess Anne is making her trip as the president of the Save the Children Fund, which is carrying out dozens of projects all over Africa. After the formal reception at the airport in Zimbabwe, the princess began finding out for herself what life is like for children there. In many villages, there are problems because of drought, but things are much better than they were during the years of war, which ended 3 years ago. But there are 1.5 million people who don't get proper medical care. Later in her journey, when she reaches Northern Africa, Princess Anne will see for herself the full effects of poverty, drought and warfare on some of Africa's children. She'll visit a refugee camp in Somalia and spend some time there staying with a medical team. The last time any check was made on the number of children in Africa was 7 years ago, and it was reckoned then that there were nearly 200 million. By now, the figure is much higher and the hardship even greater. Princess Anne's tour of Africa will go on for another 2 weeks, and she's by no means the only member of the royal family abroad at the moment. The Queen and Prince Philip are on a tour of the islands of the South Seas. Prince Charles is paying a visit to South America. Prince Edward is in New Zealand, helping to teach at a college. And the Duke and Duchess of Kent are in Hong Kong. Prince Andrew, though not out of the country, is on active service with the Navy. So if the Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, wanted to consult the highest-ranking member of the royal family in this country at the moment, technically it would be Prince William of Wales. But the Prime Minister will be spared any baby talk because Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother are standing in for the Queen while she's away from Britain. A campaign to stop the killing of baby seals along the Irish coast has scored a major victory. Animal conservation groups there have been trying to stop the yearly killing of baby seals by fishermen. They claim the seals eat their catch. Well, today the Irish Fisheries Minister banned this year's seal cull along the coast of Ireland. The seal population has dropped by a half in 2 years. That, says the Irish government, is probably due to the unlawful killing of seals. Well, now, as well as stopping this year's planned seal cull, the Irish government are bringing in tough penalties for anyone caught killing seals anywhere around the Irish coast. And finally tonight, the fortunes of Britain's worst junior soccer team from Worthing in Sussex could soon improve. Their goalkeeper, Chris Smith, has been getting a bit of professional advice, as John Myatt now reports.
Goalkeeper Chris Smith is trying to lose his reputation as the Mr. Fumblefingers of schoolboy soccer. Having picked the ball out of the net 150 times in 5 games for Worthing, Chris is spending this half-term busy at the sort of lessons any soccer-mad lad would love.
Touch the other post.
He's at the National Goalkeeping Centre at Ipswich because the chief instructor there, Ipswich Town goalkeeper Paul Cooper, heard about 12-year-old Chris and decided he needed a little help from a friend.
And it's the same when you're lying down. You either catch the ball that way or that way. All right?
Is it going to make a real difference to you when you go back?
I should think so, yes. We've been training hard and I should be much better than I was.
He doesn't seem to lack confidence, Paul.
No, he's got a great deal of confidence. As he said when he came, he said he couldn't get any worse, so there's only one way for him to go. But hopefully we're going to try and keep him down to single figures now, Chris, aren't we?
Yeah.
I wonder what the score will be this weekend. And that's all from Newsround. See you again on Superstore on Saturday. Until then, bye-bye.
And now with news of Saturday Superstore, here's Mike Reed.
Hello. On Saturday Superstore this Saturday at 9:30, the very moving film of the wedding of Keith and Maggie that you've all been waiting to see. And not only that, but also Dr. Hook. I'll bet they're singing a jolly sad song too. But never mind, because the French Foreign Legion are here in the shape of Beau Geste. And also, but say it quietly because Sherlock's here, Spit the dog. So join me for a very moving Saturday Superstore this Saturday at 9:30. Well, move then.
And now on BBC1, Blue Peter.
Forward. Good boy. Forward. That way, I say. It's where as natural as you can. The right one, because it's try and keep as natural as you can. Right hand.
Hello. And today we've got the latest news on Prince, and you can see how he's progressing with his advanced training a bit later on.
But first, the moment all Will-o'-the-Wisp fans have waited for. We're delighted to hear that lots of people have had lots of success in making Arthur the crafty caterpillar.
Yes, and from the looks of all the letters that we've received, he really has gone down a treat. Well, one of the biggest compliments came from the man who actually invented all the Will-o'-the-Wisp characters, Nicholas Spargo. Now, Nicholas said he loved our Arthur, and he sent some great pictures of Mavis Cruitt, the fat fairy, with all her different expressions. And Nicholas also said that his beau geste, can't wait to see that. Well, you can see it on Sunday evening at 6:10 on BBC1. And then we'll be back with you on Monday with the Calgary Stampede.
Wee-hoo! See you then.
Bye. Bye-bye.
And that's it for Children for today. Just to mention, there's international snooker on BBC Two at the moment, followed by another of those something else debates.
In South East at 6 after the news, Arthur Lewis, the veteran Labour MP dropped by his local party, defends his 38-year record as member for Newark. The Physical Education College in Kent, which invented netball and gave us the gym slip, faces closure 3 years before its centenary, while the fight to keep it open is led by England's former women's cricket captain Rachel Hayhoe-Flint. And from Alexandra Palace, a special report from the Custom Car Show with the latest and most incredible tailor-made cars and bikes. That's all in South East at 6 after the news.
Favourite comedy on BBC1. Ronnie Corbett is back with a new series as Mother's Boy Timothy.
Sorry?
Winifred is a biology teacher.
Oh, I took biology at school, you know. But Mother kept me at home the day we did page 44, and I never wrote. Winifred again. It's the third Winifred you wanted me to meet, Mother. Where do you keep finding these Winifreds? Have you got a secret Winifred factory somewhere?
Sorry, a new series starts tonight at 8 o'clock on BBC1.
And now on BBC One, we have the evening news with Richard Baker. It's 5:40.
$750 Rolls-Royce workers at Crewe will lose their jobs. Miners begin voting on whether to call a strike. A princess arrives in Zimbabwe on a Save the Children tour. And a tea lady who got teapot elbow and a £2,000 award. Good evening. Rolls-Royce Motors, blaming the continuing recession, say that 750 workers are to lose their jobs because of falling sales. 40 of the redundancies are at managerial level. Rolls-Royce, which employs nearly 4,500 people at Crewe, says it must cut its operating costs to survive. A report from Martin Henfield.
Once there were long waiting lists for a Rolls-Royce. Now, some dealers are quietly offering a discount. This year, the company will build 2,400 cars. That's 600 fewer than last year. The traditional sales markets of Britain and America have been hit by the recession, and the company refused to stockpile new cars. Rolls are proud of their hand-built vehicles made by men who've served lengthy apprenticeships. Whilst other manufacturers use robots, Rolls men put their cars together with painstaking skill, and the company promised that standards will be maintained despite the economies. But it's the recession, not the quality, which has discouraged potential customers.
Many people are hanging onto the car that they presently own for a longer time, and that is having an effect on the number of cars that we sell in this country in particular.
Workers have been asked to volunteer for redundancy. For many, it was a sad day.
Well, everybody's very depressed. Bit of a disaster, isn't it?
We didn't expect Rolls-Royce to come to this. You know, it really is a bitter blow.
The decline in sales has also meant changes in the boardroom. 3 directors have left the company, and they've appointed a new managing director.
Rolls-Royce are optimistic. They say there are people who can afford cars costing between £50,000 and £80,000. The Middle East market is buoyant, and now they intend to embark on a worldwide sales drive.
ICI lost £100 million in petrochemicals and plastics in the first 9 months of this year. That's nearly twice as much as for the whole of 1981. It meant the whole group's profits were lower, and ICI warned they see no sign of an improvement in trading conditions. But brighter news from the building societies. Their chairman, Alan Cumming, says the mortgage rate cut expected in 2 weeks will be followed by others. For technical reasons, however, he didn't expect the next cut before April. Miners have begun voting on whether to support industrial action over pay and pit closures after the Coal Board's response to their claim. They'd asked for a rise of 26 to 31%. The board offered 8 to 9%. They'd also claimed a 4-day week. That was rejected. They wanted retirement at 55. That too was rejected. So the union's leaders are now asking for backing for industrial action. But they've caused controversy by linking 2 issues, pit closures and pay, which the Coal Board say are not connected. Our reporters have looked at voting in 2 areas. First, John Thorne in Yorkshire.
The union president, Arthur Scargill, had told his members that the ballot was the most important of their lives. The 450 miners at Ledston Luck Colliery outside Castleford began voting at 4 a.m. as men came to the surface after the night shift. The NUM had decreed that television and newspaper coverage of the ballot should not be allowed. It's part of a continuing clash with the union leadership over what it terms the gutter standards of the press.
Yeah. Our votes are disqualified if you cover this ballot.
Your votes are disqualified?
Yes.
Who said that?
This is from national level. So we're asking you if you'd kindly either go off the premises, you can film from off the premises
anyway,
on the roadside.
The union message has been clear, and no vote would be a sign of weakness, as Mr Scargill put it, allowing the mad dogs of pit butchery to be fully unleashed. On the other hand, support for the union would show that miners were prepared to fight like men to save jobs.
Here, in his own power base of the Yorkshire coalfields, Arthur Scargill is almost guaranteed total backing.
There appears to be a confidence in the union hierarchy that miners throughout the country will accept the crucial nature of this ballot. Early soundings at the pit heads have convinced NUM leaders that they have captured the coalface vote despite the Coal Board's forceful counter-arguments.
In Northumberland, balloting doesn't begin in several places till this evening. But in this traditionally moderate area, a lot of miners seem hesitant about the union's call for authority for a full strike.
I'll be voting no.
You'll be voting against strike?
I'll be voting against the strike.
Why will you be doing that?
Well, I think it's picked the wrong time. There's too much coal. That's my personal opinion anyway. And I think the offer's a reasonable one in the present climate.
Do you think the men will vote against a strike?
Ash and Corrie, I think, yes. I can't speak for anybody else, like. But Ash and Corrie, I definitely think they'll vote against it.
But as miners collected their pay slips for the last 5 days' work, there were those who felt the pay issue was all-important.
That's for 5 shifts, right?
How much money is that?
That's £100, right?
And so that's why you'll be voting yes on the ballot?
I've got to keep my family, a house and 2 children on that, right? That's just why I'll be voting yes.
At Calverton near Nottingham, miners' wives were planning to demonstrate against industrial action because they fear it could mean a hard winter. But a miner was killed at the coalface shortly before the demonstration was due to begin. And when they were told, the wives called off their protest. Another Roman Catholic priest has spoken out against the continuing violence in Northern Ireland. He said churchmen should be prepared to give their own lives to save innocent victims and to interfere with the plans of would-be murderers masquerading in the name of the Catholic population or as Protestant paramilitaries. Father Dennis Fall, who was largely responsible for ending last year's hunger strikes, said victory would be when a Catholic priest would risk or give his life to save a Protestant, and a Protestant minister would do the same for a Catholic. Police and troops have returned to the scene near Lurgan in County Armagh, where 3 policemen were killed yesterday by one of the largest bombs used by terrorists in Northern Ireland. Brian Barron has been to the scene.
The security forces were in no hurry to clear the blast zone. There's always the risk that IRA had planted other booby traps. It was midday before teams of soldiers and tracker dogs began a painstaking search. No one was allowed near the huge crater, 60 feet wide and 25 feet deep, made by one of the largest terrorist bombs ever used in Northern Ireland. At Lurgan, police put on show a stolen motorcycle and 2 helmets, which the 2 IRA bombers apparently used to escape after setting off the blast. The men who died came from Ulster's newest police station, a concrete fortress that replaced one destroyed by an IRA bomb 10 years ago. 8 other police officers from Lurgan headquarters have already died in the Troubles.
Well, I think I can only reiterate Bishop Daly's appeal yesterday to the public that there should be no revenge and to leave everything in the hands of the forces of law and order.
In Armagh today, the funeral of another terrorist victim, Mr. Peter Corrigan, the father of 11, shot dead on Monday. Today, a priest described him as an innocent family man. Mr. Corrigan campaigned in last week's Assembly election for the IRA's political wing. Among wreaths was one from the IRA's military command, another from the INLA. The security forces watch from a discreet distance.
The search is still going on for the gunman who killed 3 Irish soldiers in Lebanon last night. The soldiers, all under 21, were part of the United Nations peacekeeping force stationed in Tibneen. Apparently they were checking vehicles at a bridge when 2 men drove up and opened fire. The Dublin government now wants the role of the UN troops to be reviewed. In Spain, long queues formed at polling booths where Spaniards are voting in their 3rd general election since General Franco's death in 1975. More than 26 million people are eligible to elect the members of the 2 houses of parliament, and they're expected to return Spain's first socialist government when the polls close in just over an hour's time. Voting continues in the 2 by-elections in Birmingham and London, with just over 4 hours to go before the polling stations close. The elections were called following the deaths of Jocelyn Cadbury, the Conservative MP in Birmingham Northfield, and Harry Lambourne, Peckham's Labour MP. The results are due shortly after midnight and will be covered in a Newsnight special on BBC2 at 12:10. Leicestershire police are investigating 2 attacks on elderly women which occurred within 5 hours of each other last night. In the first, an 84-year-old woman from Loughborough was left needing 41 stitches in her face. In the second, in Ashby-de-la-Zouch, a 58-year-old woman was hit with an iron bar. She's still in intensive care. Chris Powell now reporting.
84-year-old Winifred Gamble and her 80-year-old husband were watching television when their dog began barking. Mrs. Gamble went to find out why. When she didn't return, Mr. Gamble searched the house and found his wife critically injured in their bedroom. Her nose was broken, both cheekbones were fractured, and she needed 41 stitches in her neck and face. The second attack was 5.5 hours later in a quiet cul-de-sac of old people's bungalows. 58-year-old Joan Ison lived alone. She was attacked as she was about to leave the house to return a copy of the evening newspaper to a neighbour.
She opened the door. There was 2 youths standing at the door in balaclavas, and they'd got an iron bar. They tried to cosh her with the iron bar, but she put her arms up to prevent herself. But they obviously hit her arms because she's got bruising to her arms and her face.
Police say there's nothing to link the 2 attacks except the ferocity of the violence. According to detectives, it's some of the worst they've seen. And they're convinced someone will have seen something. They say in both cases, the attackers must have been covered with blood as they ran away.
After a jailbreak from Winson Green Prison, Birmingham police are warning the public that the 5 escaped prisoners could be desperate. John Ireland is serving 6 years for robbery and firearms offences. Walter McCormack and Stephen Linton are serving sentences for robbery, as are John Waring and Terence Adams, who was committed for 7 years. The men got away from the prison wing where rebuilding work is going on. They broke through a plywood screen, smashed a lock securing a builder's ladder, and then used it to climb a wire fence. Once on the 15-foot perimeter wall, the prisoners slid down knotted sheets. They were seen by a woman who gave the alarm. A big police search was mounted, but the men got away. The prison governor said later that if the repair work had not been going on, the men could not have got away. He said the jail was built in 1845 and repairs had to be carried out while the prisoners remained in the building, despite the security risks. In North Wales, 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, were killed when their car collided with a coach near the Menai Bridge last night. The accident happened on a sharp bend near the bridge as they drove home from a night out. 2 more girls in the car are seriously injured. The car was so badly mangled that firemen used cutting equipment to free the survivors and get the bodies out. No one on board the coach was injured. A floating hotel will arrive in the Falklands in time to improve accommodation for about a quarter of the garrison this Christmas. The Swedish ship Safe Dominia, housing 900 troops, will be anchored at Port Stanley. Princess Anne has started a busy programme of visits to childcare centres throughout Zimbabwe, the latest stop on her tour of 8 African countries as president of the Save the Children Fund. Peter Hawthorne reporting from Harare.
The flags were out in Harare when Princess Anne arrived from Swaziland on her African Save the Children Fund safari. The welcome, however, was for President Masiri of neighbouring Botswana, who's on a state visit to Zimbabwe. This was the first visit of a member of the royal family to Zimbabwe since Prince Charles represented the Queen at independence 2.5 years ago. It's clear, however, that on this tour, the Princess prefers to keep the royal presence as unofficial as possible. The Princess toured the British Council Library and Study Centre, which was opened in Harare in April. Of the 400 students who used the centre, many are former guerrillas from the pre-independence war who missed out on their studies and are now trying to catch up. Later this week, the Princess will visit health training centres in the remote tribal trust lands near Lake Kariba.
The former British and European boxing champion, Joe Bugner, is back in the British ring tonight. He hasn't had a fight here since 1976. At the age of 32, he'll be taking on Winston Allen, who's won only 12 of his 21 bouts. This report by Mike Blakey.
Joe Bugner's return to British boxing after an absence of 6 years has created astonishing interest in the heavyweight division. All 2,000 seats for tonight's fight in the London hotel have been sold out, and if all goes well, Bugner, at the age of 32, is planning to regain the British and European heavyweight titles. And if that happened, he could expect his 4th chance to win the world title. But first he has to beat the Welshman, Winston Allen. He's ranked number 10 in this country. He's 10 years younger than Bugner, but he's giving away well over 2 stones in weight. From the weigh-in poses, Bugner expects to win in 2 rounds. And as he says, he'll win it in style.
I've won every fight of mine in style. Whoever says I haven't won in style, I think is a fool. Every fight I've had, I've won in style. That's why I look like this.
We certainly saw your last fight 6 years ago. That was pretty quick, pretty stylish.
I dislike the man.
Cricket, and Chris Tabaret, who yesterday celebrated his 28th birthday and his appointment as captain of Kent, was today celebrating his highest score for an England 11. He made 157 as England built up a first innings lead of 142 over northern New South Wales. A tea lady who was forced to give up work because her heavy teapot injured her elbow has been awarded damages of £2,250. Mrs. Pamela Osarak said her former employers, Hawker Siddeley Water Engineering, should have given her a smaller pot. Gary Lloyd went along to have tea with her at her home in Berkshire.
At home, after her High Court victory, Mrs. Osarak was making tea in a more manageable pot. It was one 10 times the size of this, in which she served the factory brew, that gave her what was described as golfer's elbow. It hasn't stopped her making tea for her husband. Apart from the pain in her arm, she says she decided to sue her employers as a matter of principle.
Well, I felt strongly about it because they didn't take any notice of my complaints. I kept complaining about this teapot and they just seemed to ignore the complaints that I made.
Your complaint was that the teapot was just too big?
Yes, and too heavy to lift.
Have a nice time. The case stirred up some predictable headlines. The judge said he'd done some experiments